They paid me double for serving at a wedding where there was no dancing, no cake, and the bride and groom never looked each other in the eyes. 3 days later, they found 2 bodies on that same ranch. 3 years ago, I worked at an event hall in Culiacán. Nothing fancy, nothing special. A place where people celebrated quinceañeras, small weddings, birthdays. I waited tables, cleaned glasses, collected tips. I was 28 then, and saving up to move north, not across the border, just to Hermosillo, where my sister had been living for years. My life was simple, shifts from Thursday to Sunday, off on Monday and Tuesday. I rented a small room near downtown, ate at cheap eateries, watched soccer with my coworkers after work. Nothing drew attention to me until that request came. It was Wednesday afternoon when my boss pulled me aside. He said he needed trustworthy people for a private event on Saturday. Small wedding, good pay, almost double the usual for the night. And he made something else clear. It was just going to be 3 waiters, the music guy, and him coordinating. No one else. I asked why so few people for a wedding, and he said that's how they wanted it. Reserved family, no fuss. I needed the money, so I said yes. On Friday, he gave me the address. It was a ranch on the outskirts, about 40 minutes by truck from downtown. He told us to arrive at 5 in the afternoon to set everything up before the guests arrived. When I got there that Saturday, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The ranch was surrounded by trees. There was a big house in the back and a wide lawn in front with well-kept grass. Lights hung between the trees, round tables, white chairs. Everything looked normal, too normal, but there was no one else there except us setting up the place. My boss was nervous. I noticed because he smoked more than usual. The other 2 waiters were young guys who barely spoke. The music guy set up his equipment quickly and stayed quiet too. Around 6, the trucks started arriving. Black pickups, tinted windows, no plates or covered plates. Men got out in dress shirts, some with boots, none in full suits. They moved like they owned the place, like they owned the air. No one greeted us. They spread out across the lawn. Some sat, others stood near the entrance. One of them, a tall guy with dark glasses even though it was getting dark, approached my boss and whispered something in his ear. My boss just nodded and signaled us to start serving drinks. Whiskey, beer, tequila, no wine, no champagne. I went from table to table serving and trying not to look anyone directly in the eyes. I learned that working at the hall. When people don't want to be seen, you don't see them. Around 7, another truck arrived. An older man with a hat got out. He walked slowly. Everyone else stood when he arrived. No applause, no music, just silence and respect. Behind him came a young woman in a white dress. No veil, no bouquet, no smile. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. But what happened next made everything before seem like a warning I didn't know how to read. The woman in the white dress walked to the center of the lawn and stood there, alone. The man with the hat sat at one of the main tables. The other men returned to their places. No one spoke. The music guy played a song, a soft ranchera, but no one danced, no one moved. I kept serving, filling glasses, picking up empty bottles, trying to be invisible. At one table, I heard 2 guys talking quietly. One said to the other that this was so she would learn. The other just nodded. They didn't say more. The bride kept standing in the center, looking at the floor, hands clasped in front like she was waiting for something. She looked resigned somehow. Then another truck arrived. A young man got out. White shirt, dress pants, clean shoes. He looked scared. He walked toward the lawn, escorted by 2 guys who didn't touch him, but stayed so close he couldn't run. That was the groom. They took him to where the woman was. They stood side by side. She didn't turn to look at him. He didn't look at her either. Both stared at the floor. The man with the hat stood up, walked toward them, said something I couldn't hear well, but it sounded like, "This is what happens when there's no respect." Then he made a sign, and someone brought a small box, placed it on a table next to them. That's when I understood this wasn't a real wedding. I kept serving, but I couldn't concentrate anymore. My hands were shaking. I tried not to drop the bottles. My boss looked at me from afar and, with his eyes, told me to keep working, not to stop. The two in the center kept standing without moving. No one took photos. No one toasted. No one congratulated. And just when you thought you'd seen the strangest part of the night, came the moment when everything stopped making sense. The man with the hat returned to his table. Everyone else sat too. The music continued. The couple in the center stood like mannequins, as if they'd been placed there just to be there, not to experience anything. I passed near the table where the man with the hat was. He was talking with two others. I heard him say, "You know what comes next?" The others nodded. One of them looked toward the groom and then back to his drink. That was all. No cake, no first dance, no toast around 9. The man with the hat stood and left. The others started leaving too. The trucks started one after another. The couple in the center stayed standing until only we from the service were left. Then, one of the last men to leave signaled them. The two got into a truck and left too. My boss told us to clean up quickly, leave nothing, talk to no one about this. We packed everything in less than an hour. No one said a word. We loaded the things into the hall's truck and left. On the way back, we didn't talk either. When we got to the hall, my boss paid us in cash. He gave us more than agreed, said, "Thanks," and then added, "Forget this night." The other two young guys took their money and left. I did too. I got to my room around 11 at night. I sat on the bed with the money in my hand. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what I'd seen exactly, but I knew it hadn't been a real wedding. I knew that woman and that man weren't there because they wanted to be. I lay down but couldn't sleep. The next day I went to work as usual. My boss mentioned nothing, neither did I. The other waiters at the hall asked how the private event went, and we told them fine, quiet, nothing special. 2 weeks passed. One Monday I was in my room watching the news when something came on TV. They'd found 2 people on a dirt road near a ranch. No names, no details, just that they were investigating. They showed aerial images of the place. I recognized the trees, the house in the back. It was the same ranch. My blood ran cold. I turned off the TV. I sat in silence. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should say something. I didn't know if anyone else had made the connection. If you've ever felt trapped between knowing something and not being able to do anything with it, you'll understand exactly what I felt that night. The following days, I tried to stick to my routine. Go to work, wait tables, collect tips. But I couldn't stop thinking about that night. The woman in the white dress, the scared man, the man with the hat saying, "You know what comes next." I told no one, not even my sister when she called. She asked how I was, and I said fine, everything normal, that I'd soon have enough for the bus to Hermosillo. But I wasn't saving to leave anymore. I was saving to survive, because I started feeling that something bad could happen to me if anyone found out I'd been there. One night after work, one of my coworkers asked if I'd worked at that ranch where they found those 2 people. I said, no, that I'd had the day off. He believed me. My boss never mentioned it again. He kept hiring me for normal events, real weddings, quinceañeras, birthdays, as if that night never happened. but I knew it did, and I knew I couldn't do anything about it. 3 months passed. I kept working at the hall, living in the same room, saving, but I wasn't the same. It was hard to sleep, hard to concentrate. Every time I saw a black-tinted truck, I got nervous. One Thursday afternoon, I was eating at an eatery near work. A guy came in. I hadn't seen him before. He ordered food and sat at the next table. He didn't look at me, said nothing, but something about him made me uncomfortable. I finished quickly and left. The next day at work, my boss pulled me aside again. He said he needed me to do a delivery service, take drinks and snacks to a house, extra pay, address in hand. I asked what it was about, and he said it was a regular client, not to worry, just go, deliver, and come back. Something in his tone didn't convince me, but I needed the money. I said yes. That night, I went. The address was a house in a quiet middle-class neighborhood. Nothing strange. I knocked, and an older man opened. He let me in. The house was empty. Just him. He said to leave the things in the kitchen. I did. As I was leaving, he stopped me. He asked if I'd worked at a ranch a few months ago. My heart stopped. I said I didn't know what he was talking about. He looked at me steadily. He said he knew I'd been there, that he needed me to tell him what I'd seen. I said I hadn't seen anything, that I'd just gone to wait tables. They paid me, and I left. He said he was the uncle of the woman in the white dress, that he'd been looking for answers for months, that no one would tell him anything, that everyone was scared. I was scared too, but something in his voice made me stay. It made me feel like maybe he was the only person who really wanted to know the truth, not for revenge, just to understand. I told him everything, what I saw, the trucks, the man with the hat, the couple standing in the center, the silence, the phrases I heard, all of it. He cried, thanked me, said no one else had wanted to talk to him, that everyone avoided him. Even her family didn't want to touch the subject. He asked if I knew who the man with the hat was. I said no. I'd never seen his face fully, only from afar. He said he understood, gave me extra money. He asked me to call if I remembered anything else. I left feeling an enormous weight, because now, not only did I know what happened, but someone else knew that I knew. What happened next didn't come out in any official version. A week later, the woman's uncle appeared on the news. They'd tried to break into his house. He was injured but survived. They said it was an attempted robbery, but I knew it wasn't. He called me the next day. He said he had to leave the state, that it wasn't safe anymore, that he thanked me for telling him, that it had given him some peace, even if just a little. I asked if he was going to do something with the information. He said no, he couldn't. He had no way. He just wanted to know what happened to his niece, and now he did. We hung up. I never heard from him again. I kept working, kept saving money, but I couldn't stay in Culiacán anymore. I didn't feel safe. I started making plans to leave as soon as possible. A month later, I quit the hall. I told my boss I was going to Hermosillo with my sister. He wished me luck. Didn't ask anything else. I packed my things, sold what little I had, bought a bus ticket. The night before leaving, I dreamed of the woman in the white dress. She was standing in the same place, but this time she looked at me, and in her gaze was something I couldn't decipher. It wasn't a plea, not forgiveness. It was just emptiness. I woke up sweating. The next day, I got on the bus. I arrived in Hermosillo. My sister welcomed me well. She got me a job at a restaurant. I started over, but I never stopped thinking about that night. That was the last day my life was normal. Here in Hermosillo, everything was different. The city was bigger, hotter, more impersonal. No one knew me. No one knew where I came from. That gave me peace. I worked at a seafood restaurant downtown. Good tips, stable hours, friendly coworkers. My sister lived with her husband and their 2 kids in a small but comfortable house. They rented me a little room in the back. It wasn't much, but it was enough. 6 months passed without anything strange happening. I started feeling like maybe I had left it all behind. Maybe I could start fresh. Until one day at work, a customer came in who seemed familiar. I wasn't sure, but something in his walk, in the way he looked around before sitting. It reminded me of the men from that night at the ranch. I approached to take his order. He looked me straight in the eyes, and I knew he recognized me too. He said nothing, ordered his food, ate, paid, left. But before leaving, he left a note on the table with the tip. I read it after he was gone. It said, "I know you were there. Don't say anything. Live in peace. This is a warning." It wasn't fear I felt. It was something worse. Resignation. I kept the note. I didn't show it to anyone, not even my sister, because I knew if she found out, she'd want me to go to the police. And I knew that would only make things worse. I kept working, kept living, but now with that note in my mind all the time, I knew they'd found me, knew where I was, knew that as long as I stayed quiet, nothing would happen. But I also knew that if one day they decided I was a problem, I couldn't do anything to stop it. That's the part no one understands if you haven't lived it. It's not just fear, it's powerlessness. Knowing your life no longer depends entirely on you, that there are decisions you made or things you saw that now haunt you, and there's no way to undo them. For months I lived like that, looking over my shoulder, avoiding crowded places, avoiding making new friends, avoiding drawing attention. My sister noticed something was wrong, but when she asked, I just said I was tired, that working at the restaurant was tough. She believed me because she wanted to. But before judging what I did next, you need to hear what happened. A year after arriving in Hermosillo, I met someone. Her name was Laura. She worked at a clothing store near the restaurant. One day, she came in to eat. I waited on her. We chatted, hit it off, started seeing each other outside work. Nothing serious at first, just coffees, walks, talks. But little by little, I grew fond of her, and she of me. It was the first time in a long time I felt normal, like a real person, not someone running, not someone hiding. I told her I came from Culiacán, that I'd worked at events, that I'd come here looking for something better. I didn't tell her the other part, didn't tell her about the ranch, didn't tell her about the note, because I wanted her to see me as someone normal, not someone marked. We were together for 6 months. They were the best 6 months since I arrived in Hermosillo until one night, leaving the movies, we ran into someone. It was the same guy who'd left me the note at the restaurant. He was with 2 others. They saw us, recognized us. One approached, asked Laura if she was my girlfriend. She said yes. He smiled, looked at me, said, "Good that you're making your life." And they left. Laura asked who they were. I said I didn't know, maybe restaurant customers. She didn't fully believe me but didn't push. That night, I couldn't sleep because I knew what that look meant. They knew where I lived, knew who I was with, knew everything. The most disturbing wasn't what they did. It was how easily they justified it. 2 weeks later, Laura disappeared. She left work one Wednesday afternoon and never got home. Her mom called me that night asking if I knew anything. I said no. I'd seen her in the morning and everything was fine. We went looking, called hospitals, talked to her friends. No one knew anything. The next day, her mom filed a report. The police took statements, They checked cameras, found nothing. I knew who had her, but I couldn't say. Because if I said something, not only would something happen to me, but to my sister, her kids, everyone close. Keep this detail because it comes back. 3 days passed. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just waited because I knew at any moment they'd contact me. And they did. On the 4th day, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. A voice I didn't recognize said Laura was fine. They wouldn't hurt her. They just needed me to do something for them. I asked what they wanted. They said they needed me to go to Culiacán, to a specific place, pick something up, bring it back to Hermosillo, and Laura would appear safe and sound. I asked what I had to pick up. They didn't tell me, just gave the address and said I had 2 days. I hung up. I sat in my room not knowing what to do. If I went, I was in something with no way out. If I didn't, Laura wouldn't return. And just when I thought it was all over, I had no real choice. I called work, said I had a family emergency, needed a few days. They gave them to me. I bought a bus ticket to Culiacán. I left that afternoon, arrived in the early morning the next day, took a taxi to the address they gave. It was a warehouse on the industrial outskirts, abandoned at first glance. I knocked on the door. No answer. Knocked again. The door opened by itself. I entered. Inside was a truck. The keys were on the dash, and in the back was a large box. I didn't open it. Didn't ask what was inside. I got in the truck, started it, left, drove back to Hermosillo. 8 hours on the road without stopping, without eating, without sleeping well. Every time I saw a patrol car, my hands sweated. Every time I passed a military checkpoint, my legs shook. But they didn't stop me, didn't check. I arrived in Hermosillo at dusk. They contacted me again, said to leave the truck in a parking lot near downtown, leave the keys inside, walk away. I did. Half an hour later, I got another call. They said Laura was free. They'd drop her near her house, that this never happened. They hung up. I ran to Laura's house, arrived before her, waited outside. Half an hour later, a taxi arrived. She got out. She was fine. No bruises, no visible wounds, but her eyes were different. She hugged me, cried, said nothing. We went into her house. Her mom cried too. They wanted to call the police. Laura said no, nothing happened. She'd gotten lost, confused. She was fine now. Her mom didn't understand. I did. Laura and I were alone. I asked if she was okay. She said yes. They hadn't touched her, just kept her in a room, gave her food, told her nothing would happen if I did what they asked. I asked if they'd said anything else. She said no, just that. That's when they made the biggest mistake. Laura and I stayed together for a while after that, but it wasn't the same. She was scared all the time. So was I. Any car following us, any person staring too long, everything was a threat. She quit her job, shut herself in her house, stopped going out, stopped living. I started shutting myself in too. Stopped going to public places, stopped doing normal things. One day, she told me we couldn't continue, that every time she saw me, she remembered those days, that she needed distance. It wasn't my fault, but that's how it was. I understood. We stopped seeing each other. Years later, people would still wonder how no one saw it coming. I was alone again, but now with something worse than loneliness. With the certainty that I was no longer in control of my life, that at any moment they could ask me for something again, and I'd have to do it. Months passed. They didn't contact me again, but that didn't give me peace. It just gave uncertainty. I started thinking about leaving again, farther, maybe to Tijuana, maybe cross the border, start in another country where no one knew me. But every time I thought about it, I realized it was pointless, because if they'd found me once, they'd find me again. And so another year passed. working, living, waiting, until one day I saw something on the news that changed everything. They'd arrested a group of people in Culiacán. Big operation, dozens of arrests. Among them was the man with the hat. They showed his photo, his name, his charges. It was him, no doubt. I felt something strange, not joy, not relief. It was like a weight shifting, but not fully lifting. There's a detail almost everyone overlooks, and it changes the whole story. The following days, I followed the news. They said they'd dismantled a large network, found evidence of many things, that there'd be more arrests. But they never mentioned the ranch, the wedding, the two people they found. It was as if that never existed, or as if it didn't matter to them. I continued my life, but with that information in my head, with the feeling that maybe now I could breathe a little, until one afternoon I got another call. It was a different voice. I didn't recognize it. He said they'd seen the news, knew I'd seen it too, that they wanted me to know something, that the man with the hat wasn't the only one, that there were more, that there would always be more, and that I was still someone who knew things, and that wouldn't erase just because they arrested someone. They hung up. That was the exact moment they crossed the line. That call broke something inside me because, until then, I'd lived with fear, but with the hope that at some point it would all end, that at some point I'd be free again. But that call made it clear that wouldn't happen, that I was marked, that no matter how much time passed or how far I went, they'd always know where I was, always be able to use me, and that made me angry. It wasn't explosive anger, it was cold, slow anger that settled in my chest like a weight I could no longer ignore. I started thinking about things I wouldn't have dared before. What if I stopped being afraid? What if I stopped obeying? What if I made a decision they didn't expect? What I found didn't match any known version. I started investigating on my own. Not obviously, not asking directly, just listening, reading news, connecting dots. I learned that several people involved in similar cases had disappeared. Not just victims, but witnesses, people who knew things. I learned that the arrests they'd made hadn't changed much, that on the streets everything was the same groups operating just with other names, other faces. I learned that no one was really safe, not those who obeyed, not those who stayed quiet, and that gave me a strange clarity. If I was going to live in fear anyway, if I was in danger anyway, then what was the point of continuing to obey? If this seems confusing, it's normal. There's still a piece missing. I'm not saying I became brave. I'm not saying I made a heroic decision. I'm saying something in me broke. And when something breaks inside a person, what's left doesn't follow the same rules. I quit my job at the restaurant. I told my sister I needed time for myself, that I was tired, wanted to do other things. She worried but didn't stop me. I started moving more, going out more, doing things I'd avoided before. Not because I no longer had fear, but because the fear no longer controlled me the same way. One day, while walking downtown, I saw one of the guys from that night at the ranch. He was buying something at a stand, alone, no escort, no tinted truck. I followed him. I don't know why I did it, I just did. I followed him to a building, saw him enter, waited. He came out an hour later, went back to his truck, left. I noted the building's address, came back the next day, observed, learned his schedules, routes, who he met, where he went. I had no plan. I was just gathering information as if that gave me some control over something that had controlled me before. The strange thing is that file never should have existed. One night, while searching online, I found something odd. an old forum of those almost no one uses, where people talked about things they couldn't elsewhere. Someone had uploaded a document. It was a list. Names, addresses, photos of people involved in different groups. I don't know who uploaded it, don't know if it was real, but some names sounded familiar, and one was the guy I'd been following. According to that document, he wasn't just an operator. He was someone who cleaned up, made things disappear. People, evidence, problems. I read all I could, saved the information, turned off the computer, sat in my room in silence thinking, all this starts making sense later. Weeks passed. I kept moving, observing, gathering information, without really knowing what I'd do with it, if I'd do anything. Until one day I got another call. Again, they asked me to do something. Go pick something up, move it from one place to another. This time, I said no. There was silence on the other end. Then they asked if I was sure. I said yes. They said that wasn't smart. To remember what happened with Laura. To remember they knew where my sister lived, where her kids went to school. I said I remembered, but still, no. They hung up. I waited for them to come, for something to happen, but nothing did. A week later, I saw the guy I'd been following again, this time with 2 others. At a restaurant eating, laughing like nothing. Until today, no one has been able to explain why that name appeared. There I approached, sat at a nearby table, ordered something to eat, observed them. At some point, one turned to look at me, recognized me, said something to the others. All 3 looked at me. I didn't avert my gaze. I looked back. Nothing happened. They kept eating. I finished too, paid, left. But something changed in that moment. Something in how they looked at me, as if they no longer knew what to do with me, because I wasn't acting as I was supposed to act. I wasn't running anymore, wasn't obeying, wasn't afraid in the way they expected, and that confused them. If you've ever felt alone against the system, you'll understand exactly what it felt like. The following months were strange. I kept living my life, but differently, more alert, more active, more aware. I stopped waiting for something to happen. I started moving first, observing them before they observed me, being 1 step ahead instead of 3 behind. I wasn't planning anything violent, wasn't planning to do justice. I was just trying to regain some control over my own existence. And it worked for a while, until one night, walking home, I felt someone following me. I turned. No one. Kept walking. The feeling didn't go. Entered a store, bought something, left, felt it again. This time, I stopped, turned fully, and saw them. 2 guys standing half a block away looking at me. I walked toward them. They didn't expect that. They looked at each other, hesitated. I got closer. One stepped back. The others stayed still. I asked what they wanted. No response. I asked again. One said they were just walking. I said I knew that wasn't true. There was an awkward silence. Then they turned and left. I left too, but with a new certainty. They no longer knew how to control me, and that made them doubt. And what comes next is just the part almost no one knows. 2 months later, I learned the guy I'd been following was no longer in Hermosillo. He'd left. I don't know if by choice or because someone moved him, but he was gone. That gave me a breather, but it also left me with a question. And now what? Because I couldn't go back to who I was before, couldn't pretend nothing happened, couldn't live as if I didn't know what I know. But I also didn't know what to do with all that. So I went day by day with no clear plan, just trying to stay alive, keep those I love alive, and not lose what little was left of myself. This isn't fully understood until the end. 2 years have passed since all this. I'm still in Hermosillo, still working, still living. My sister is still fine, her kids too. Laura left the state. I don't know where. I haven't spoken to her again. Sometimes I think about that night at the ranch, the woman in the white dress, the scared man, everything I saw, everything I didn't do, everything I couldn't do. And I wonder if anything I did after served any purpose, if it changed anything, if it protected anyone. I don't know the answer. What I do know is that I'm not the same, and I'll never be again. The majority stick with this version, and that's why they understand nothing. There's something I've never told anyone, something I did a year ago, and I still don't know if it was right or wrong. I found the contact for the uncle of the woman in the white dress, the one who'd sought me out years before, the one who had to leave Culiacán. I sent him a message. I told him the man with the hat had been arrested, that maybe now there was a chance for someone to really investigate what happened that night. He replied days later. He said he already knew, that he'd tried talking to authorities. No one listened. They said without evidence they couldn't do anything, that the arrests were for other crimes, not for what happened at the ranch. He asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said no, I couldn't, that putting my name on something like that was signing my sentence. He understood. He said not to worry, that he just wanted to try, that at least now he knew someone else remembered his niece, that someone else knew she existed, that she wasn't just a number in a statistic. That was all. We didn't talk again. This that seems minor isn't. There are days when I think I should have done more, should have spoken, should have risked everything so someone would pay. But then I remember the threats. I remember Laura disappeared for 3 days. I remember the call where they said they knew where my sister's kids went to school. And I realized there was no right choice, only bad ones. And I chose the one that let me stay alive, keep caring for those I love, keep being something like a person. I don't know if that makes me a coward, don't know if it makes me complicit, don't know what it makes me. I just know I'm still here, and every day is a decision to keep being here. And just when they thought it was all over, 2 months ago I went back to Culiacán for the first time in years. I had to sort some papers, family things. I was there only 3 days. On the second day I went to where the event hall I worked at was. It doesn't exist anymore, closed long ago. Now it's a hardware store. I passed by the neighborhood where I lived. My room is rented to someone else. Everything looks the same, but feels completely different. On the last day before leaving, I passed by the road leading to the ranch. I didn't go all the way, just passed near and saw there were other houses now, new constructions, people living as if nothing happened there. And maybe that's how it works. Life goes on, places get recycled, people get replaced, and what happened gets buried under layers and layers of time and new stories. But for those of us who were there, who know, that never gets buried completely. It's always there, just below the surface, waiting. What happened that night changed everything. I don't have a clear ending for this story. I don't have closure. I don't have a moral. I just have this, my version, my perspective, my truth of what I saw and lived. I don't know if that serves anything, don't know if telling it changes anything, but I told it, and now it's here. And maybe someone hears it and understands something I can't. Or maybe not. Maybe this story gets lost among thousands of similar stories of ordinary people who saw things they shouldn't, knew things they shouldn't, and had to learn to live with it. Because that's the reality in many places, not just here, in many parts, where the line between victim and witness is so thin It sometimes doesn't even exist. Where speaking can cost you everything and staying silent too. Where there are no clear good or bad guys. Just people trying to survive. I've survived so far. I don't know for how much longer. I don't know what will happen tomorrow or next year. But today I'm here telling this, and that has to count for something.